Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of this 2021 Draft Retrospective. We are going to be looking over the AFC South today. But a couple things first. Number one, I am Gabe or Anderson. My Twitter is right below me. It's at FTP Anderson.
I'm Elijah, FTP John, my Twitter.
And then the main overall Twitter for the franchise tagged page is going to be at tagged franchise. And then the other order of business that we need to get to is our Trey Lance grade. It was already pretty low.
It was
Let
a
me.
D.
It was a D,
Um,
but he has since been traded for a fourth rounder, and you know, honestly, they
F
got some.
minus
They
for
got something out of him at least, because he
F
the way he was
minus
going. All right, F minus. But the way he was going, right?
three, yeah, three, three games played. Traded up three first round picks for him.
One first round pick
Woohoo!
per game played. Whoop whoop. All right. So yeah, we're basically moving that Trey Lance grade down to an F just because of the trade and the lack of return on investment for three first round picks. And it gets even worse when you look at what those three first round picks became for the Dolphins, where it's the reason they have a dynasty, and basically Trey Lance is the reason that the 49ers
One
don't.
one of those picks was subsequently traded and became like a like
Yeah,
that's
that as well.
disgusting.
Yep.
Um,
But anywho,
this
we'll
video
we'll
isn't about that.
yeah, we'll move on to the AFC South rather, and we'll start off with the Titans. And another thing, kind of before we get into this, but also about the Titans. Honestly, obviously, condolences to Caleb Farley, his family, and everything. That's a just crazy situation. So, not gonna be throwing dirt on any wounds, but we are gonna be grading him fairly. So, prayers up, thoughts out. But this is gonna be a fair grading. So, we'll start off with Caleb, where he just kind of unfortunately hasn't lived up to the hype he got. Most corners in this draft were pretty decent. You had the top two, obviously, Sertan and J.C. Horn have both
Mhm.
played lights out. But even later on down the board, you had Asante Samuel Jr. who played fine, nothing insane, but definitely did better than Caleb Farley has. You had a bit of a miss with Eric Stokes, but I think even he did a little bit better than
It's
Farley.
not a miss. It's just kind of like preference on that. Honestly, he's not great, but yeah, it's difficult to see Farley picked at this spot and bringing any values close to the other guys from.
And before we get into the grade, I just want to throw out some stats. He's had 12 total games through 2 seasons. He has only started two of them. He has 14 total tackles over those 2 years. He doesn't have a single interception. He only has one pass defended, and he has taken 163 defensive snaps, which is maybe a couple games, maybe a couple full games worth of snaps. But he has not made an impact at all. And out of the first round, that's really not something you're looking for. I went with a D. I think D minus may be a little bit more accurate, but he's still on the team and he did have potential. That's why he was taken so high. So I could see him
Yeah,
making an impact in the future.
he he's even allowed a touchdown in so few snaps, and he's allowed a 70% comp percentage. But it's like again, so few snaps, so it's going to be pretty high because there's just so little data to draw from. But I did end up going with a D minus on that, um, because it's a first round, mid late round kind of first round, but still in the first, you're expecting a lot more than
And this
160 snaps.
the salt on the wound is the other DBs taken. Obviously, there were a lot better choices if they wanted DB, and then there were just a lot better choices overall for them
Yeah,
here. But we'll move swiftly onward from Caleb Farley, and we'll go to round two, pick 53, where they took Dylan Radins, an O lineman. He has missed several games over his first 2 seasons, and as you know from the past few videos, we don't really like injuries that much. But when he's not injured, he's not even a serviceable starter. We don't love giving PFF a lot of credit for what they do, but his grades have been under 50 both seasons, and he is currently the fourth left guard on the Titans depth chart.
yeah. Uh, Projecting forward, obviously with the depth chart, it's not great, and make matters worse, it's a second round pick, kind of middle of the second round again, but 400 career snaps for the team, playing in a lot of games, but not really playing consistent on the O line. So there's that to consider. And then he also had 7 penalties and has allowed 2 sacks. And you're getting like 200 snaps a year on average. Not great out of the second round. So I ended up going D on that. Or are you in the same ballpark?
I also had a D on him. I just want to point out some players that were taken after him, notably Pat Fryermuth, 2 picks later, Nick Bolton, 5 picks later, and Pete Werner, 7 picks later, and Creed Humphrey, a few more picks later after that. So there's just
Yeah.
like that. That back end of the second round was oddly filled with talent. It was also filled with a ton of busts. You had Kyle Trask and Josh Myers and Terrace Marshall thus far, and Tutu Atwell, Dwayne Eskridge. Like you had a couple misses, but for the end of a second round, it was pretty solid, pretty filled with talent, and they just kind of missed there.
Especially when you consider that the next pick they make is a linebacker. Moving into that linebacker, round 3, pick 92, we got Monty Rice. Um, he's gotten more snaps than both picks before him, and that's not so much a good look for the team as it is a bad look for the team. He doesn't stand out to me personally. He does have tackles, he does have good TFLs, and he's being good for the Titans in their sphere, where he's fourth on the team for tackles that last season he played, and I think he's got a good role for them, and he's currently listed at inside linebacker number 3. So I have no there's no looking forward production that I'm gonna be like, oh, he might make a leap and he might increase, but at the moment, I think he proves his value in the third round, but not outstanding value. So I just went with a base C on him, kind of like a wait and see.
So just a little bit. He's the second left inside linebacker. I don't know if that was a newer depth chart release because they've been releasing a lot of depth charts lately. So I don't know if he's moved up or not from when you last looked at it. But he is currently the backup left inside linebacker. And then a couple of the stats for him: he through 2 seasons has had 102 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. He has had 23 appearances, 10 total starts, and he's available, but at an inside linebacker and an off-ball linebacker position, typically you see a lot of tackles, you see a lot of stats accrued, and you just kind of don't with him for whatever reason. So he just hasn't really been that good, and I think that availability is, the best of ability. The best ability is availability. Obviously, that's like the saying and whatever. But when you're not performing with your snaps that you're being given, I think that's kind of a worse look for him. I went with a C minus just because he's not like a later round guy. He's a third rounder, and
Yeah,
he just hasn't performed to expectations. I feel
yeah. I
like.
suppose. Granted, this draft class itself was pretty weird with where, like, coverage linebackers were taken, like not edge rushers, but like linebackers that are off ball, and so third round is where I feel like it's general linebacker, like you're gonna get that value, and he doesn't bring it as much as others would. So I'll match you with that C minus.
Okay. Moving onward, further down in the third round, 8 picks later, they took Elijah Molden at DB. He has been better than Caleb Farley thus far. He did miss his entire second season, or almost his entire second season, with an injury, but in year one, he was better than Caleb. It doesn't mean he was good. He appeared in 16 games, started in 7. He allowed a 67% completion percentage and a QBR of 101.1. Again, not great, but he had starts. And he was only there for 1 year, and I was going through this whole grading thing, and I was like, he doesn't look that terrible. Like he looks pretty decent. And then I checked the depth chart, and he's moved to free safety and is the backup free safety. So his snap counts are going to be pretty limited from what we might have seen in years 1 and 2 at cornerback. I had a C minus on him as well.
I matched that C minus, basically everything that you just said. He has 700 snaps for the team, and 80 were last season. Um, he's definitely not. We just have the 1 year to grade for production wise, and we also don't have anything to project forward on with him now being a backup free safety.
And
So
occasionally the backup safeties and such do play nickel, so he may come
yeah,
up in the slot corner position and do stuff from there. But projecting forward, even that, he's not going to get a full season of snaps or anything, so he's not going to be going back to that year one production.
yeah,
And then also just coming off injury is always tough to project as well if he's going to be the same player when he comes back.
yep. So C minus locking in there for both of us. And moving forward, we have 9 picks later in the fourth round now. Pick 109, Des Fitzpatrick, wide receiver. An easy F here, as he's currently a Steeler, at least was at the time of grading. With cuts now being made, he may no longer be a Steeler.
I had an F plus on him because he scored a touchdown for the Titans. Yeah, no, F is good for him. He didn't have a return on investment. Touchdown out of the
Yeah,
fourth round. That's cool. He's not on the team anymore.
yeah. 49 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 receptions,
Yeah,
kind of a.
he's got more touchdowns in the NFL than I do. All right.
Yeah, who are we to judge? F plus, all the way.
All right. We'll move on further down in the fourth round. 135, Rashad Weaver, an outside linebacker. Uh, in 16 games and 4 starts, he had 5.5 sacks and 15 QB hits, along with 7 TFLs and some mediocre tackle numbers. Um, he's not like an all-star or anything, but 5.5 sacks out of that fourth round is not terrible. I am actually pulling him up right now to see. That was actually all in year two. In year one, he actually started at D end, not outside linebacker,
Yep.
and then took that switch to the outside linebacker position and ramped up his production. The snap counts as well were he played on a little under 60% of snaps that he was available for on defense. Uh,
We have the 1 year of production, but this time it's not a year removed like it was with Molden. It is the year, like it's like, okay, he didn't do anything rookie. Now he's having a year. Uh, One point I want to make is that he had 22 pressures in year two, playing just those 60% of snaps, and he was ranked 42nd in the league with those pressure numbers. I just feel like that's pretty good when you consider the amount of edges in the league. Being 42nd out of those guys and also being out of the fourth round for them is pretty good production.
I took his production kind of with not necessarily with a grain of salt, but he did appear in all of the games. He started in 4 of them, and 5.5 sacks is good. It's not great. It's not phenomenal. The record's in the 20s, so he's not coming for any sort of crazy all-star pace. Um, I had a C on him. Kind of thinking back on it more, I could go like maybe C plus B minus is probably the
Yeah,
range I'm in.
I was only ever so slightly higher at a C plus. I didn't enter the B's for him. It was really just the pressures and like where he ranked in the league for that. That was kind of impressive to me. It's not like he's super late where I'm gonna be moving him into B's because of that production, where it's like a sixth or a seventh rounder. But fourth round, they haven't really had anyone hit thus far, and I would say that this is their best draft pick, and so I feel it's worthy of having their best grade.
Just another thing of note on him is that he is currently the second strong side linebacker, so he's not going to be starting, but he may get some snaps coming in every now and then for some to
Yeah,
relieve this starter.
he may still see about the same snap count that he has been seeing. It's just not going to increase.
Yeah. But we'll move on into the sixth round now. At pick 205, they took Racy McMath.
All
For
name team.
all name
Woo.
team, there was a TikTok about him that I saw that I just like. It was last season during fantasy football season, and somebody was in a 32 team league, and they claimed Racy McMath off waivers and started him one week because of injury. So he's got a special place in my heart just because I thought that was hilarious. Um, but in 14 games, 2 years with the team, he has 4 catches for 48 yards. He's nothing special in a wide receiver room that is truly nothing special, and the fact that he can't make any inroads in that is kind of a disappointment. I had him at a D just because he is in the sixth round. He is still with the team, but he is currently a second string receiver, probably as low as sixth on the depth chart at the receiver position, so I could go lower.
Yeah, he's got 170 snaps on offense, 172 on special teams. He's made 2 IR appearances, much like Caleb Farley, and in the sixth round, it's just slightly below average to me, so I also went D for his grade.
Okay, cool. And then we'll go to Brady Breeze, a DB. He had 5 games with the Titans and no stats, and then he was waived and signed by the Lions. That's an easy
Yep.
F. Still in the sixth round, so not even into the seventh yet, and you're already getting a guy that just isn't going to play for your team.
Yeah.
And then,
especially with the team that they have,
yeah,
where they aren't the Bills, or they aren't, the top teams that we've seen that manage to lose players just off their practice squad immediately, and they're not that team.
that was something that I kind of wanted to get into, not as much with the Titans because they have been performing fairly well in recent years, but the rest of the teams in the AFC South are just kind of not good, like historically. And so it's kind of
Yeah.
tough to grade somebody that's going to a not good team that has not good support for them and then say that they're bad because they haven't been performing when it could be a multitude of reasons. So whether or not, Racing McMath's lack of production is because he has Ryan Tannehill throwing him the ball, we wouldn't know because we haven't seen anybody other than Tannehill at quarterback for the Titans, and we might not see anybody better in a couple of years. So just take note of that. That is like that's the reality is that these teams are not very good. We kind of saved the worst for last in that regard. So, but we'll go on to the overall grade for them. I had a D. When the highlight of the draft is a second string outside linebacker, it's not a good draft. There's
Yeah.
some potential if guys can stay healthy, if guys can start to make impacts, but as of right now, there just isn't that like success that you need to see after 2 years.
Yep. I went slightly lower. I went D minus. I see this draft as equally bad as the Cardinals.
I can see that. I also think that because the Titans had three players in the C range and the Cardinals only had two, that's kind of like lean Titans. But I see that as well. Uh,
You're feeling flat D then.
I kind of am. I
Keep
don't really
keep those
mind.
Cardinals isolated.
This is a bad enough
Hey,
team that I don't mind pairing them with the Cardinals. But
yeah. Hey, we'll make
you know,
one D minus for every conference. That's a good precedent to set. So.
hey, we haven't gone through the other drafts yet, buddy boy. Um, but we'll stick with the D minus for them. We'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll throw them in there with the Cardinals for up for worst draft. And we'll move on to the Texans. First pick was in round three, pick 67. They took Davis Mills. There was, you know, through one season, he almost looked like the best quarterback out of this highly touted draft class. In the year where the Texans lost Deshaun Watson to uh, the bench, they needed an immediate replacement, but they didn't have a pick until the early third round. They didn't get Kyle Trask or Kellen Mond, which was great for them, uh, but they also didn't get stuck with Ian Book. So uh, they they did pretty well with what they could. Got nearly 3,000 yards um, with Davis Mills through that 1 year, and obviously they've replaced him now, so he's not their long term solution. C.J. Stroud hopefully is, but I think he's a good backup, and oddly enough, I don't hate the pick even now because he played well enough in his first two seasons and then is good enough to still maintain that backup role where he'll be solid if Stroud gets hurt behind that O line or if anything else happens.
Him and Zach Wilson are in the same boat where they're backing up now, and this guy's pick is 65 picks later.
Yeah.
So there's that to consider.
And
Um,
arguably Davis Mills played better than Zach Wilson when he was on the field.
Way
So,
better,
yeah.
way better. He was third out of this draft class. He was third in yards. He's like, yeah, he's got the 25 interceptions. He tied for league's most last season. It's not great, but he's playing with a not great team. He was drafted late to be that kind of bridge quarterback. He fulfilled that role. I personally was on the Davis Mills hype train, like immediately. I was like, "Oh, Deshaun's sitting out. Let's watch, Davis Mills ball out." He's he's the reason why they didn't have a first overall pick. So uh, you could say that hurt the team, but I say no. He won a game, so give him credit. Damn it. Uh,
That's Lovey Smith all day. I'm sorry, bud. He was sticking it to the owners who he knew were going to cut him. Power to you, Lovey
yeah.
Smith. He did great.
Hey, the whole team backed him up. They were like, you know what? We can't let this happen.
Well, yeah,
We gotta
players don't
play
tank,
forward.
coaches don't tank. Only the front offices tank.
Yeah.
But
What was your final grade
yeah,
for
I
Mills?
had a C plus on him just because, like,
Okay.
in the grand scheme of things, in a vacuum, he's not that good of a quarterback. But he was a serviceable starter for 2 years that was good enough to, you know, play until they could get a replacement, and they didn't have to trade for someone. They could wait until they got a good draft position. They could wait until they had a nice pick lined up and everything. So I don't hate the
Yeah,
pick, and I don't hate him as a backup either. I think he's going to be a really good backup in the league. So
yeah.
um,
I had him at a C plus as well.
further on in the third round, moving off of Davis Mills, haven't talked about him enough. Uh, Pick 89, they took Nico Collins. He is currently the projected wide receiver 1 in Houston, believe it or not.
What?
But he
Oh my
hasn't,
god.
yeah, he hasn't crossed the 500-yard mark. He only has 3 total receiving touchdowns through his 2 seasons. But in his defense, kind of what we said, bad teams, bad success, and bad teams, bad stats, not necessarily bad players. So the lack of production and the lack of scoring can be chalked up to shoddy team play in a bad situation. But the Texans still have a very weak receiving room, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
pull
Real
that
quick,
up right now.
I have their depth chart pulled up.
Okay.
I want to just voice some complaints here. I mean, granted, it's a preseason depth chart, but why in the hell are Tank Dell and John Mechie not in the starting 3? Like, I get it, you got Robert Woods, but
Yeah,
like,
Bobby Trees,
come on.
man. And Noah Brown. Noah Brown kind of popped off last season with Dak. But yeah, no, I think Tank and Mechie are going to be starting alongside maybe Noah Brown. I don't know if Robert Woods has that much left in the tank, but we shall see this upcoming season. And
Yeah,
I do kind of like Nico Collins. Like, I like him as kind of a gadget player where you can throw him in for some plays here and there and he might succeed. And he's not a terrible receiver, especially one that you can pick up in the third round. But the success just hasn't been there so far. I had a C on him just because he's, again, been that kind of bridge, like, he's getting starts until they can find a permanent solution, even though he's a young enough player that he could be that permanent solution if he becomes good enough.
yeah. I had him at a C plus. He's kind of he performed on a weak passing offense, but considering his draft position, where you look at some of the second round and some of the late first wide receivers and how they produced, his value is just a lot better coming out of the third round, even though he only had the 1,000 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's still miles better than a certain Seahawks player.
I mean, hey, give me a Monra, though. He's still on the board. Um,
Yeah, but you gotta. I'd say value the misses more than the outlying guys in the depth that could pop up. But
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
went
yeah.
C plus on it as opposed to just flat C because I also just like Nico Collins.
I'll see that. I'll agree with that. And then they didn't have a fourth round pick either after 2/3. So we're going to the fifth round, pick 147, where they took Brevin Jordan. Very fun name. I don't think that'll make the all name team. It's just a fun one.
Just a
But
neat one. Yeah.
he got some playing time in the offense, but was never a starter for multiple weeks in a row. Um, that was something that I was just curious about because I saw that he had a couple starts, but none of them ever lined up one after the other. And he definitely won't be starting this season because they brought in Dalton Schultz,
Yep.
and thus far he hasn't shown much to, you know, get him more playing time. But I don't really hate the pick. It's the same situation where it's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's in the
Yeah.
fifth round. You're getting a serviceable backup. Um, I had a C minus on him just because of the lack of good stats, but we can chalk it up to just being the Texans once again if we want to. So
Yeah, I'm actually on the flip side of those C's. I'm at the C plus range. He had 300 yards, 3 touchdowns off of 500 snaps. And when you're not the tight end one, some of those snaps are coming in at blocking. So you're not going to be the main read on any play, especially on a passing offense that is structured the way theirs was, and it's not very strong. They're not hucking the ball every play. They're not designing these plays to have a tight end break free, especially not Brevin Jordan. Uh, so I gave him the little plus because fifth round value, he's not projected to get any better looks. Um, in fact, he's moving down to the 3 slot, but he's been around that third slot for the first 2 years. It's just now there's different people in front of him. So I could see any range of the C's, but I went C plus personally.
he was kind of stuck behind O.J. Howard and Jordan Akins for his
Hmm.
first couple seasons, and I think he's just kind of going to be stuck again. Like you said, I mean, he's listed as the tight end 3 behind Tegan Quitoriano. Um, so if that tells you anything, I'll meet you in the middle at a C if you want to
Yeah, we'll
for
move to
him.
that.
And then we'll move to Garrett Wallow at round 5, pick 170, a linebacker. He has been relegated to a third string role this upcoming season, and that means he doesn't have much room to make an impact, but he was given room to make an impact in his first 2 seasons and didn't. His starts saw increased production, like he did better when he was actually starting, not just getting snaps off the bench. But when you're on the field for more snaps, that's gonna happen. It doesn't mean that he was really good, and especially when he's an off-ball linebacker, we see players in that position get stats all the frickin' time. So I had him at a D plus, and looking back on that, I feel like that's a little generous. But
Wow. So I'm in an opposite boat here. His production, and is the way you said, but I don't think he was given much opportunities because he only had 17% of snaps each year, and there's no sign that that's going to increase, but it's also not enough to, I think, give it like a fair shake to grade him on. And so I went C minus, just like he has 36 tackles, he has 3 TFLs, he has 1 sack, and he's also not being allowed to see the field that much.
I think that
But
there's
I could go into the D's, like the D plus range, I suppose, if you consider quote unquote projecting forward. He's gonna be he's second on strong side linebacker, so he there's ups and downs to it.
not necessarily just projecting forward. I think that also kind of looking at it as why didn't he get opportunities? And there had to have been something that the coaching staff saw in camp, in practice, where they just kind of were like, okay, we can throw him out there a couple times a game and he'll do fine, but any more than that, and, he could have been a liability or something else, and that's why he wasn't getting the starts. Because as we said, in his starts, he put up more stats, but you can't see everything from a stat sheet, which is why I kind of leaned lower. Because if you're getting more starts and putting up more stats in those starts, why wouldn't you be given more starts unless you weren't doing something else well? I guess is my reasoning.
Yeah, I guess I could kind of see that. It was for both of his first 2 seasons, he was the fifth linebacker for snap count, and I when you're the backup of one side of the linebacker, I could see him returning to the like same kind of delegation of snap count. So I suppose we'll lean more towards yours, and that was just a flat D, correct?
D plus is what I had him at. I just said that was generous, so
Okay. Yeah.
I'll just keep it at a D plus because he did get a couple stats. He's out of the 5th round. It's not a terrible value, I suppose.
You suppose. Moving forward into the 6th round, pick 195, Roy Lopez, D lineman. He's somehow seen the field for over 1,000 snaps. He has 11 TFLs, 67 tackles, 2 sacks, and he's around like their third best D, D lineman. And yeah, it's not huge value if you look at him versus the league, but him versus the team he was drafted to, he's on the sixth. He's out of the 6th round, and it's not like the Texans defense is anything to write home about, but he's produced for the team. I went C plus on him just
Wow.
because I'm not gonna brag about the third best D lineman on the Texans. If the third best D lineman for the Texans is not the fifth best D lineman for any other team out of the AFC South.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, so I have some interesting stats here. The Texans ranked last, 32nd in rushing yards allowed last season, and second to last in rushing touchdowns allowed. That is the job of the interior D line, which is where Roy Lopez plays. He was getting starts, and he was letting up yards and touchdowns. He was getting starts, and he was not playing well. So he was just objectively, like, the team was objectively bad, and it's not obviously one person's fault, but when you're the third best defensive lineman on a team that is dead last in the league, you are not a good player. I'm sorry. All due respect to Roy Lopez, respect your game, and you could probably beat me up if you wanted to, but
Probably.
yeah, he could easily. But okay, hold on, shut up. Uh, I had him at a D, and I don't see myself moving too far up from that. Just because, like, yeah, 11 tackles for loss, cool, but he's an interior D lineman getting snaps, and he's on a team that has really bad overall team stats. And then also his PFF grade, which I don't like giving a ton of credit to, but it was a 53 his rookie season and a 55 his second season. So he didn't really do much aside from get TFLs.
Yeah, he generated those TFLs. Let me tell you. What
I
was your
guess
final grade on him? 'Cause
I
you were
guess out of
so
the sixth round,
aghast.
I had a D. I had a flat D. I guess out of the sixth round, I can see the value, and I can meet you in the middle at like a C minus. But
Yeah,
I'm
I'll go
I'm
C
not
minus
going
on
any
him.
higher than that.
Yeah. I gave a lot more. I think I was kind of grading it more as like, oh, this is their last pick of the draft, not so much as like, oh, it's still the sixth round.
Hmm.
Um, uh, yeah, I think I got a little lost on that front. But
I think so too,
moving,
man. What the hell?
moving towards their final grade there, as a team, it's very small. They have a lot of inconclusive grades where we just kind of smack the C label on it. Not that much to see, not that much to know about, and no way to really be generous to them with how the whole team's kind of ranked and been the past 2 years. So I lean more negative with grading the team, and I just went flat D on them, despite the lowest is a D plus, but come on, yeah, you walk away with no real impact starters after 2 seasons.
Okay. I thought my grade on them was harsh after how we fixed their grades. So initially, um, when I was grading them, I had a C plus, then a C, then a C minus, then a D plus, then a D. So I just like one letter or half letter grade down every single pick. And when I saw that, I was like, that's kind of how draft should go. You know, you've got your best pick at the start and your worst pick at the end, and it's kind of like a just sloping crash the whole time. Um, so I had a C on them just because they got a starter for a couple seasons out of Davis Mills. They got a starter for a couple seasons out of Nico Collins. They got a nice rotational piece in Brevin Jordan. And then if Garrett Wallow comes in, if Roy Lopez had 11 TFLs, so they got players that all kind of made an impact, and most importantly, are all still on the team. And then if we just look at the grades that we have right now, it's 4 in the C range, and 1 is a D plus.
Yeah.
And I don't think D is exactly accurate. I think maybe like a C minus, maybe.
If
We'll give him a C, but we'll give him or a C minus. Sorry, we'll
C
give him a C
minus,
minus, but a C minus with a very heavy asterisk that just says this draft was not good. We don't need to spend any more time on this short draft. And we'll go. Wow, we talked about that draft for like 25 minutes, and it
so
was
long,
5 players.
so
Um,
long.
we'll cut out most of that. Moving forward into the Jaguars draft, they had Mr. Trevor Lawrence picked at first overall. Look, he's an A plus. If we gave Justin Fields an A, Trevor Lawrence is an A plus. The only real argument that I can see that would have me saying no, he's not an A plus, is that this pick was an absolute gimme. Like, you're not taking anyone else. It was never gonna happen. It just straight up was not. And 2 years in, after an absolute disaster of an Urban Meyer season, and then you get a competent head coach, and all of a sudden you've won a playoff game. And I think that even if he looked terrible in year one, he looked terrible in year one because it was the Jaguars who just had the first overall pick, and Urban Meyer, who is very clearly not a competent coach.
We have the slightest disagreement here, but um, I do want that you can't give anything to that first year. It was a shit show. He was getting lap dances in clubs. He was not focused on leading a fucking football team. Um, they drafted the Prince who was promised, as his moniker is on the PFR, for whatever the fucking reason it is. um, I don't understand it. Okay,
Goddamn
I've never
Prince,
heard
bro.
this.
Yeah.
Anyways, the Prince that was promised. He uh, he improved a lot year to year, uh, probably
Not just that.
entirely Urban Meyer. But if we want to go ahead and take a little rewind to my friend Davis Mills, they have the same amount of career interceptions, which is something. Uh, yeah, Trevor was ninth in yards this past season, 10th in TDs, 20th for interceptions, and had the sixth lowest likelihood of throwing it in. So Urban Meyer fucking
What the
blew it
hell?
up.
Okay, another thing I do want to say, he didn't look perfect going in like at the start of year 2. I remember seeing him in like the early like the first half of the year, and he just kind of looked rough. Like
Mhm.
it was like I remember people were just calling him a bust, and like he was entering bust territory. But when you're a young quarterback who has had really good coaches throughout high school and college that have let you be basically undefeated in the regular season for sure. Like he did not
Mhm.
lose a regular season grade through high school and college, a regular season game rather. But when you go from that to having the most incompetent head coach in the entire NFL, and he just kind of ruins your rookie season and the development that normally happens there. So you have to fast track that development to happen early year 2, and then by the end of year 2, you're looking like a top 5 quarterback in the league. Maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but you know what I mean. Like he's looking like exactly what he was drafted to be, and I can't give that, especially with our Justin Fields grade. I can't give that any less than an A plus.
See, with the Justin Fields grade is why I made it just A, because they have the same situation. Head coach change, they got better. Projecting forward, they're going to be great. They're going to be great in very different ways, but they're both going to be great. And so I feel like Trevor Lawrence pick number 1 overall. Justin Fields not. There's not that big of a gap between their draft picks. I'm not going to knock it because of that. I'm not going to say, oh, he has to be A minus. Justin Fields is an A. But I do want them to match, just because they both had the one kind of shit show year, and they both have the one year that was like showing what they can be and what we're hoping they will be thus forward. And I both see them as top 10 quarterbacks next season.
Trevor actually showed something at the end of last year where Justin Fields couldn't really. Like they got the first overall pick, and it's not a obviously wins aren't a QB stat. Trevor Lawrence won a playoff game. Like there's such a stark difference between the two. Like yeah, Justin Fields has a really weak team around him, but Trevor Lawrence's
Yeah.
team around him wasn't that great either. Like if you look at the Jaguars roster, it's not
Mm.
super strong. Their starting receiver was Zay Jones. Like
Defensively, their team was a monster, and they're they're defensively getting better. And so I think as a full team, if you look at full team versus full team, man, we are tangenting this fucking episode. Oh my god.
yeah, we
Anyway,
are,
okay,
but we're strongly
I
disagreeing.
I I want to lock it in on an A
I
because
don't, because
I
Trevor Lawrence was better than Justin Fields at the end of last season. At the end of last season, both
yes,
wonderful quarterbacks,
yeah.
both great
End of
quarterbacks.
last season,
Trevor
Trevor
Lawrence
Lawrence
was
was
better.
great.
A plus.
After week 8, Trevor Lawrence had only 2 interceptions in the regular season for that quarter of his career. That's a quarter of his career thus far. I'm not going to call him the prince that was promised after a quarter of a season.
But when
He
you
had one
have
season that's a wash, and he has one season that was a very good progression to being better. But I don't want to just immediately put him in like the top 5 quarterback conversation. And I feel like an A plus needs to be that top 5 quarterback level, not so much the A range where you can be a top 10, you can be a top like you can vary on where you are.
I don't see them at the same. I don't think Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields are at the same level. I think Trevor Lawrence is objectively better than Justin Fields as a quarterback. I think that Justin Fields is great. I think that Trevor Lawrence has the potential to be the like a top 2 quarterback in the league. I don't think Fields has that upside. I think that he can be a top 5 quarterback, like for sure. I don't think Fields has the ability, well, not ability is not the right word. He's like the most physically gifted quarterback we've ever seen, but Trevor Lawrence has the like not necessarily playmaking, but like he can
Mental.
read the field. He has the mental ability to be that top 2 quarterback in the league. And I think that top 2 is only said like that because Mahomes is top 1 no matter what. That's not going to change. And I think that Trevor Lawrence can
I,
be
I've
the
done
second
some,
best.
I've done some recollection. I'll meet you at A plus, and that is because I
Cool.
reviewed the other A pluses throughout this draft, and we have Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Creed Humphrey, Pat Surtain, Talanoa Hufanga, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Martha Parsons, and Panay Sewell. And I don't see him as contributing less than any of those guys by any margin, so I will put that at an A plus.
You can give him a knock because the pick was a gimme and it was never going to be anybody else. but you can't say that the production and the talent hasn't been there. So
Yeah.
it's a justified hype behind him, I think, at least. Moving forward, a second pick in the first round for the Jaguars, pick 25, Travis Etienne, or Etienne, however you want to pronounce it. I think he pronounces it Etienne, but anywho. Uh, another
And sounds like a Pokemon. I can't keep it together.
another first round running back in this draft, but he's been better than Najee. He missed a great year. I think to quote him, the year that he missed was a pretty good year to miss,
Yes.
due to Urban Meyer. So he burst onto the scene in year two. He basically made James Robinson completely irrelevant, to the point where James Robinson is currently a free agent after being a 1,000-yard UDFA rusher for the Jaguars. Like it is such a quick fall off, and mostly due in part to the running back thing that's going on right now. But regardless, he just made it so that the Jaguars absolutely did not have to keep James Robinson on the roster. He averaged over 5 yards a carry on 220 attempts, and I will leave it at that, and I want to hear what you have to say about it, and then I got something else to add.
Yeah. So he got with the yardage and attempts that you stated. He was 13th for attempts, ninth in yardage. TD numbers were low, but as a primary back, played half of the career thus far, kind of that JC Horn uh, level, where playing good, missed a whole year, kind of hard to give him too much, but he has that chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. Sorry, Prince that was promised. How could I mispronounce that? Um, he has that chemistry with him. They in college. Uh, I gave him a B. B plus is also an argument, but it really is just like how much you want to value the 1 year of running back production, when running back production seems to wane pretty heavily year to year.
Yeah, I think that because it's the second year and he was still doing that after an injury, that's pretty nice. I don't think that you should take. I think if the injury was, if you had a really good year one and then had an injury in year two, then you kind of project in the future and you're like,
Not
okay, does he
yeah.
still have the same amount of gas? But it was injury year one and then going into year two. I had a B plus on him, but I couldn't find the exact article or anything. But I remember when the injury happened, there was a something came out about it being the way he runs, where he has his feet kind of like pointed outward, and it makes it so that his change of direction is extremely quick. He can turn on a dime and he can be like the most elusive back in the league, but it makes him more susceptible to Frank injuries, which is what that injury was. And so it's kind of looking forward, is he still going to be healthy? And he obviously put together a full season in year two, but if he steps wrong and hurts his foot again, is that it? Like you got to kind of take that into account. And yeah, he did play all 17 games in year two, started 12 of them after taking over the starting job. But I don't think there's anything to worry about yet, but kind of looking into the future, that is definitely something to take into account. But that being said, I did have a B plus on him.
Yeah, so I'll match B plus.
Cool.
Moving forward into round two, pick 33, we have Tyson Campbell, a DB who has accrued 25 pass breakups and 5 interceptions, and has forced a fumble thus far in his career. Both years for the team, he led in tackles for the corner group. He's allowed less than 60% completion as a player on the team, just his career, under 60% completion, and he allowed 3 more touchdowns in year two, but 6% less completions. Kind of iffy. It just matters where you're being targeted, if it's red zone or not. And while he's not a caliber of corners taken in the first round, he wasn't taken in the first round, so
He
not
was
going to
taken
hold
one
that.
pick after the
Yeah,
first
it
round.
was one pick after. Um, Plus, that one pick after really helps him miss all of the late round first guys that were bad.
Yeah.
He's corner two for the team. He's seen over 2,000 snaps, and he was sixth in the league in pass breakups this past season. What was your grade?
So
Into what you have to.
I just kind of said that he improved so drastically from year, or not drastic, or so drastically. He improved a lot from year one to two. In year one, he allowed 66.7% completion and only 54.2 into year two. And More notably, he went from a 94.0 QBR allowed to a 78.0 QBR allowed when targeted. I called it essentially another first round pick because it is pick 33. It's the first pick of the second round.
Yeah.
But it's a very good pickup. It's a corner that kind of rivals the other corners that have been taken. I don't think he's as locked down as J.C. Horn or Pat Surtain, but he also wasn't taken in the top 10. So I'm not like expecting too much from him. I think he's kind of on Asante Samuel's level, give or take, and so I had a B plus on him.
Yeah, I had flat B, but I knew it was an easy B to give. It wasn't like a, oh, I have to, convince myself that he's a B. So I could match you at the B plus if you wanted that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Cool.
And then we'll move forward further in the second round. They had 4 picks inside the top 50 this year, which is something that not many teams do a lot. But they took Walker Little, an offensive tackle. He is not a long-term starter. He is okay when he sees the field, and he'll be starting this year to start the season because Cam Robinson is suspended for 4 games, and so he'll be taking over the snaps there. But a mid-second rounder that can't crack the starting lineup isn't a great pick, in my opinion, at least. And even though he's the 4th pick of the draft, he is still top 50. So I had a C minus on him just because of his.
I also had a C minus. I'm glad that since Trevor Lawrence, we've been in agreement. It's repairing that rift in our relationship that formed for those 10 minutes.
I wanted to kill him.
Yeah, Walker Little has 460 snaps, and we're gonna see him with full-time reps when he's starting for those 4 games. But thus far, he's only seen time as a relief, coming in for injuries and such. So, yeah, C minus is pretty easy to lock in when he's drafted middle of the second round.
Yep.
Moving forward, round 3, 65, Andre Sisco. He had under 25% of snap counts in year 2 to 100, or in year 1 to 100 in year 2. And as a safety, he had 10 PBUs, 3 interceptions, and allowed 4 touchdowns. He doesn't have enough target share to really have a high value on the touchdowns and like over 75% completion percentage, but he's a safety, so he's not going to see as many targets. So there's still some level to put on that. Just off the numbers, I feel like it's very Trayvon Diggs, but at a safety, where it's a lot of allowance and a lot of playmaking with the PBUs and interceptions. It's just obviously not the level of Trayvon Diggs that we saw as a rookie, but yeah, he's a 3rd round selection. I don't hate his contribution, so I just went flat C on him.
So I mentioned the DB to safety pipeline once again. He was a DB year 1, safety year 2, and he performed pretty well. I was actually thinking you were going to grade him a little bit higher, and I was going to have to wrestle you down. But
You have the bullet again.
he got better in basically every stat from year 1 to 2, but the numbers in year 2 still weren't that good. His completion percentage allowed was 75.9, which was lower than year 1, but still over 75% completion percentage allowed is not great. And then QBR allowed was down to 117.4 from almost 150. Again, not great. And then I went and compared him to Derek Forrest, who was picked 2 rounds later, and basically the same situation where he was a DB, then moved to safety. And I was like, well, maybe I'm just not remembering the safety, QBR, or no, maybe I'm not remembering the QBR and the completion percentage that safeties allow. Maybe it's a little bit higher just because, they're not typically the primary defender. But no, Derek
yards, stuff like that.
But no, Derek Forrest was way better than Cisco was. I actually had a C plus on him just because he is getting starts, and I think he is projected to be the starter at safety. And to get a starter at any position in the 3rd round is pretty good. And the improvement shown in year 1 to 2 is something to be promising as well. I do definitely see him having a C though, if you want to stick to that. But I could go either way.
I think I'll stick to the C. He is their starter for the season, but he did have 100% snap count in year 2 as well, so it's not like he's new to being a starter.
Yeah.
Moving forward, round 4, I'm going to speed run these a little bit. Pick 106, Jay Tufili. That's my pronunciation. Fucking you if it's wrong.
Wow. We're getting...
Not you, Tufili. No, don't come... Okay. F,
Don't what?
Cut.
Yeah.
Uh,
Currently a
Moving
Bengal.
forward. Yes, round 4, pick 121. Jordan Smith, outside linebacker, also an F. He played 21 snaps with the team and has been IR inactive, and I don't know which. And it's a fourth round pick, so that's good.
Disagree. D minus. He's still on the team.
Yeah, he's still on the team, but he's an F because he's a fourth
We've
round
never
pick.
given an F to a player who is still on the team that drafted them. That's a lie.
I feel
But
like that's wrong. Yeah.
it's wrong because we gave Zach Wilson an F, but he was the second overall pick. If we're going based on what we've done in the past, that's a D minus,
it,
buddy.
it does.
We can go F if you really want to.
That's fine.
Okay, cool.
I don't have a vendetta against Jordan Smith like you did against Zach Wilson. Moving on.
I'm a Patriots fan. I have to have a vendetta against Zach Wilson. It's a requirement. I would like to take Luke Farrell, actually. Moving on to the 5th round, pick 145, we got Luke Farrell, the tight end. He has not been a huge threat in the passing game so far, but they don't need him to be. They have Evan Engram, who is a big passing threat from tight ends. He's really athletic, really fast. But something I was interested in that we haven't really been able to identify in the past is if these tight ends are good at blocking. And Luke Farrell, apparently, from even like coming out of the college into the draft, he was a blocking tight end. He was never touted as this like receiving threat. And I found one source, it's called BVM Sports. It was just some random like thing that popped up when I looked up, is Luke Farrell a good blocking tight end? And it says, it was in reference to whether or not the Jags should cut him. And it said Farrell's blocking skills make him a valuable contributor. And that is why he's still on the team, basically. So, with that being said, even though his receiving numbers are pathetic, he is not a receiving tight end. So, I would like to go somewhere in the maybe D plus to C flat range. I had a C flat on him, but I could see not doing that. But also 5th round, you're getting a decent blocker, you know.
Yeah.
So
in the 5th round, atrocious, as we already mentioned, in terms of the receptions, and as a blocker, PFF has him graded as a player at 70, which I feel when you have 15 targets, 11 receptions, and 96 yards, it's not gonna be all from his receiving stats. So I feel like part of that 70 is probably heavily weighted towards his blocking acumen, and just off of that assumption, I was like, I'll give him benefit of the doubt, and I'm at C plus, but I'll just go C because we have no facts. There's no pancake stat for me to track.
Unfortunately,
how often he bullies at the end. So.
I wasn't sure what you had graded him. You had kind of been going. I was worried you had the last 4 kind of graded as Fs just because they weren't really that good. So I was like, let me just steer this in the right direction real quick. But yeah, we'll move on. Jalen Camp, a round later, round 6, pick 209. Waived before his rookie season, been on the Texans ever since. That's an easy F.
Yes, agreed.
And then overall for the draft, they were very top heavy and then kind of fell off towards the end.
And very top heavy within the top 50.
Mm-hmm.
I'd want to point out. It's not top heavy and it ends like being top heavy at the 4th round. Their 5th selection is still the 3rd. So.
Yep. But obviously, franchise quarterback Trevor Lawrence, really good running back Travis Etienne, and then solid DB and Tyson Campbell. I initially had them graded at a B. I think that the Walker Little pick kind of stings a little bit looking back on it just because that's a bad pick in the 2nd round, as well as Andre Sisco, who is a serviceable starter, but probably not going to be any more than that. If he continues in the direction he's going and polishes his game a little bit more heading into year 2, or in year 3, I mean, then maybe he'll be a little bit better. And then all the misses, obviously. They didn't even have a 7th round pick, so I think B minus is probably closer to where I would be.
Yeah, so I had them in a C plus before you rustled me, forcefully drugged me kicking and screaming into the Trevor Lawrence A plus camp. So I guess I'll move that tiny little bit because we have mentioned that A plus to A is a big jump, and so I will move into the B minus range for that seemingly small increase, but actually very large increase.
And I think this draft definitely helped them a lot. Just team wide, they kind of got a lot better in this draft, and it's hard to do in one draft to just kind of turn everything around. And they didn't immediately. Obviously, they had the first overall pick the next year as well. But you can attribute a lot of that to Urban Meyer, which was evident after Doug Peterson came in and performed well enough to win a playoff game with this team. So really
Quarterback
just,
whisperer.
yeah, really just speaks to how bad Urban Meyer is.
Uh,
Yeah, Quiddy Pay. He's good. He's been good enough to start in all the 27 games he's appeared in. He got better from year 1 to 2, and he had fewer games played, so he went from 4 sacks to 6 sacks, 32 tackles to 45 tackles, 3 TFLs to 10 TFLs in 15 games his rookie season for all those numbers I mentioned first, and 12 games his second season for the numbers I mentioned second. He is still keeping the starting job this year, and if he continues to kind of go at the pace that he has been, he's going to do pretty well. The bad things about him are his injuries. He missed week 4 and 5 of his rookie year with a hamstring strain, and then week 6 to 8 and 11 to 12 of his second year with a high ankle sprain, which occurred in week 6, was out till week 8, came back, played a couple weeks, and then re-aggravated it in week 11. So, I he was picked near the end of the first round, and some of these guys near the end of the first round were just kind of not that good. I didn't feel the
yeah.
same way about Quiddy. And I don't remember all the grades of everybody that we did around there, but I had a B on him, just because I do think he's pretty good, but the missed time does kind of hurt him a little bit.
Yeah, I really like all of his stats that you had mentioned. One that you hadn't is his 35 pressures throughout those 2 years. Um, that's pretty damn good. The only ones off the top of my head that compare to that is Jalen Phillips and Micah Parsons, who were both selected before him. So I matched you at a B. He's going to be the starter for the team, and I don't really see him going anywhere. It's just those little minor injuries that held him back from being a high B, just because I think with that extra time he would have been able to produce a lot more and have more stats to accrue. But yeah, I think just a B flat is good for him.
I think that also another thing is that the DNs that were picked after him, or the D linemen, were Peyton Turner, who we did not like for the Saints, and then Greg Rousseau, who was okay for the Bills, and Odafe Owe, who is okay for the Ravens, and I think he clears all of them. So he was picked earlier than them. Those were like the last few picks of the first round. But I think a B. I think leaning towards kind of like the B plus range, but staying at a B. Just saying like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's really good, but the injuries are holding him back for a first rounder. And then into the second round, we got pick 54, Deo Odeyingbo. If I butchered that, sincerest apologies. But
Looks right to me.
yeah, he played 27% of snaps his rookie season and got almost nothing on the stat sheet. But in year 2, he saw 4 starts on 46% of snaps, got 5 sacks, and heading into year 3, he is actually a projected starter on the other side of Quiddy. So they kind of revamped this D line in one draft, and it's pretty nice. I think the production was significantly less than Quiddy's, and so I had a B minus on him, even though he was selected significantly later. I think that the production was considerably lower.
Yeah, I also had that B minus because in the second season where he had 518 snaps, he did have 17 pressures, 5 TFLs, 5 sacks, and I think that per snap count, his production feels on par, but still slightly worse. It's just the fact that he didn't have all of the same time on the field to put up anything else remotely close to Woody. So I also had the B minus, and they did double dip and they did revamp that D line. So
And
they have a decent pair moving forward.
another comparison I want to make to Quiddy is that he may not have had as many snaps as Quiddy has, but also Quiddy's injuries. If he was playing in all the weeks that he missed, his stats would be a lot higher than they are. So that's another kind of distinguisher between the two. But we'll move on. Round 4, pick 127, Kyle Granson, the tight end. Somehow, some miraculous way, he's actually the projected starter this year. He saw 21 and 45% of snaps respectively in year 1 and 2, and barely cracked 100 yards in year 1 and 300 in year 2. He has yet to catch a touchdown pass, and he did rank 7th among tight ends in catch percentage in 2022, but there was kind of a limited sample size with 4 of the 6 players ahead of him having more receptions. But tight ends are just kind of difficult to grade because they do a lot that isn't marked on the stat sheet. Like you can look at them, you can look at the receiving numbers, and you can say, well, this guy had, 20 drops and sucked, but that guy might also have blocked on 6 touchdown runs and been the lead blocker or the key block in that play, and you just don't know. Um,
Yeah, I to interrupt you, he's 6'2", 240, so I feel like he's not going to be that
yeah,
big blocking
that's
guy.
fair.
So, um, just to
I
interrupt you and shoot the gun on my grade, I went C minus because I couldn't tell, and I couldn't feel solid in saying he's probably a decent blocker, just because of the height weight disadvantage he's set at every snap.
Yeah, so I had a C plus on him, but I don't think I really looked at anything except for um, like, oh, he's a tight end, he might be a little bit difficult to grade. Also, his PFF grade hasn't cracked 60, um,
Mm,
but at the same time, he's in the fourth round, so I kind of took that into account a little bit. I could go to C minus, but I'd kind of rather meet in the middle at a C.
I could do that, especially because when I graded him, he wasn't their tight end one.
Mm.
He was their tight end two when I graded. So
And another thing about these depth charts is we're currently nearing the end of preseason, and so these
yeah.
depth charts are just like, hey, these are the guys that are going to be starting for this preseason matchup. So whether or not he actually steals the job of Mo Alley Cox and Jelani Woods is will remain to be seen.
Yeah.
Um,
Moving
but
forward into round five, pick 165, we have Sean Davis, a DB, F. He's played 9 snaps in his career, and it was on the Packers.
yep, currently a free agent as well.
Yeah.
And then moving on into round six, pick 218, Sam Ellinger. In 2022, he played 4 games. He started 3 of them, and he had a 3-to-3 touchdown interception ratio, under 150 yards a game, got sacked 14 times. And going into the next season, he is the QB3 ahead of nobody and behind the prodigy
Okay.
Anthony Richardson and the greatest quarterback of all time, Gardner Minshew. I had a D minus on him because he's still with the team, providing a little bit of that like emergency QB support, but he's not a very
Mhm.
good one.
Yeah, I think D minus is easy lock on that. Moving forward into round seven, pick 229, Mike
Strachan.
Strachan? Strachan?
I'm
There
going
you
with
go.
Strachan.
Strachan sounds so much cooler, so I'm gonna go with that too.
Hmm.
He's a 7th round wide receiver with 5 catches, 85 yards, and a very scarce 190 snaps. He hasn't shown us much, but he's a 7th rounder, and he has ended up on the field enough times to make catches. So I ended up going a little high on him, but I'll save that as a surprise. What'd you give him?
Okay. Yeah, I basically said exactly what you said, but he is currently listed as the wide receiver 5 behind the rookie Josh Downs, and I would not be surprised at all if he stayed right there at wide receiver 5. I had a D, and I think the only way he gets snaps this season is if wide receivers ahead of him get injured or absolutely suck.
Agreed. I went D plus on him, but now, again, they just he's just not going to see the field anymore any
Hmm.
more than he has. So D works for me there.
And then in round 7, again, pick 248, we got Will Fries, another man, really close to being all name team, but the names in this draft are just too good to include him.
They're too good to make the
Yeah.
cut. Yeah.
He had a whopping 58.4 PFF grade. It's not the lowest I've seen, and he might be starting this year. I think he's actually listed.
He was projected to be the starter when
Yeah,
I checked.
he is still
Starting
projected to
guard.
be the
Yep.
starter at right guard. He's not starting out of talent. Let me be clear about that. Um, and he's definitely more of a plug and play guy. He moved from tackle to guard, so he's got the versatility going for him. His 4 penalties and 1 sack allowed aren't awful. He had 645 offensive snaps, and that's all he let up, which is pretty good, especially for a 7th rounder. And just because we only have 1 year of data to go on, I can't give him too much praise. But getting somebody who can start if needed in the 7th round, especially at O line, isn't the worst pick in the world. I had him at a C plus, and I feel like that was pretty generous, but it was also nearing the end of the draft, so.
Yep. I had him at a B minus C plus range. Uh, Same reasons. Everything's the same that you said. It's just that real late round O lineman talent that he's now projected to start. So I gave him the B minus edge because of the projection to start, but we haven't gotten there. So I could go C plus on him.
I'll stick to C plus.
Yep.
And then we'll move into the overview where we had, a solid start to the draft, and then with Quiddy and Deo, and then just kind of mid throughout the rest of it. We got a couple one guy that's not on the team anymore, and Sean Davis, and a couple guys that won't see the field, and then we got Will Fries and Kyle Granson in there as well. I had a B minus on them. I'm still kind of feeling that, even with my grade shifting a little bit, because they didn't shift that much.
That
And
is much higher than mine was, and I had a good little explanation here where they did add some good early value to the D line, but it's hard to say that any other group got better with their additions. O line could be argued, but also last season their O line was a mess, and that made an opportunity to even have a seventh round pick step into the lineup. So there's that to consider. But I had them at just a flat C. Kind of looking through it again, they had good. If you ignore the fact of Will Fry starting out of more necessity than talent, then they have good value in the seventh round. Um, they walk away with a serviceable tight end that might be starting for them moving forward, and then two really good D linemen. So I had them at just a flat C, and I'm kind of feeling staying in the C range.
I'll go to a C
And
plus with you if you want. That's actually what I just written down on their overall grade. I don't see myself leaving the C plus though. I think they drafted very well. They made a part of their team that was lackluster, which is the D line, a lot better, and they did it in one draft. So
yeah,
I like, as much as they didn't really improve any other part of the team, they I mean, they didn't really have to. Like 3 seasons ago, they were great except for quarterback, and so they were just waiting for a quarterback, and then they just got worse. Like they've
yeah,
just gotten worse over the past few years, and so it's tough to kind of say that they were ready for this because they were kind of up there as like really good O line. Jonathan Taylor's a really good running back. Defense was stellar in like 2021, 2020 ish. So they didn't really have to end or like add that much to it, but they had a weak D end group, and so they added to it. And I think the only group you could say they needed to add to was the wide receivers. But at this point, I think their wide receivers are fine. They've got Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs as their starting three.
yeah.
And then they've
They've
got,
recovered since.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the C plus is also good just to give them extra separation from our C minus asterisk grade of the Texans.
Yeah. I actually, in my notes for the overall grade for them, I said this draft feels like the Texans draft, except their picks were earlier. And so the talent was a little bit better. But it's the same thing where it's like, this isn't a great draft, but also they got better for
Yeah,
the
they
time
got
being.
better
So,
people at those few picks.
yeah. Uh, we'll,
Jumping into the grand overview of the division, uh, rewinding the clock back to the start of this video, how long ago that
an
was.
hour and
Uh,
20 minutes ago.
yeah, the Titans, they landed themselves with a final of a D minus. Really, they started off with Caleb Farley being real injury prone and not seeing the field too much. Again, condolences to Caleb Farley given the personal situation. Um, we're not trying to throw salt in the wound with this video, but
Unfortunate timing on the recording of the video.
fortunate
We'll be
timing
we'll be
for us.
entirely honest.
We'll be honest. We'll be cut and dry about that. But moving through the rest of their draft, they really had nothing of value outside of a fourth round DN. So we went D minus for them. And then next up to my baby boy Davis Mills on the Texans, we ended up giving them a C minus asterisk. Davis Mills and Nico Collins, both were bridge players immediately out of the draft somehow. I'm continuing. I don't care that you're.
Yeah. No, I want this included.
Um, so yeah, we got two bridge players immediately out of the draft, and we managed to give them a grade of C minus asterisk.
Just because it was such a
You can
weird
talk
grade.
about the Jaguars because you
So we cut a lot of it out of the
helped me out.
video. We cut a lot of it out of the video, but I did hold him hostage and told him that if he didn't grade Trevor Lawrence as an A plus, we would not be doing the podcast that's going to be coming out in the next coming weeks. So yeah, you see it right there. But yeah, Trevor Lawrence, great player, great team moving forward, I think. But outside of the top three picks there, they didn't really have anything. They had Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and Tyson Campbell. And that was all in the top 33 picks, so the first round and one pick after that. And then they kind of fell off a cliff after that. They didn't have much by way of good starters. And so they ended up with a final grade of a B minus. And then moving on to the Colts, where they started off with Kwity Paye and Deo Odeyingbo, and basically revamped that D line, and then didn't do much of anything else except for draft Will Fries in the 7th round, who is a decent offensive lineman for them for now.
And an even better name.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. And so we ended up giving them a C plus. Overall, this was probably one of the worst divisions, not worst divisions, but a worse division. The lower echelon of this this whole process. And just kind of as like a, this is the final episode of this retrospective. We'll be doing this again next year for the 2022 draft class. So if you're interested in hearing our thoughts on that and seeing our suffering on grading for 6 months, then
Yes.
definitely stick around, hit the subscribe button, join up on everything, socials, follow us, join the Discord, and definitely check out the podcast when it comes out in about a week, give or take a few days. But yeah, I hope you all have thoroughly enjoyed this retrospective as much as we have. It's not necessarily like this wasn't all about the grades. I'll be 100% honest. It may have been for you, Elijah, but it definitely wasn't for me. It was just kind of like, what the hell happened 2 years ago? Just kind of like if we keep going back 2 years in the past every single offseason, we kind of see how these teams are being formed and how the best teams in the league have been built up over the past couple of years and what has gone into making them the better teams. And so I think that even if you disagree with us on every single one of our grades and you think we're terrible at evaluating talent and stuff, I think it's still an interesting thing to watch, to see who was drafted where. So, thank you all for watching. Take it easy.
Deuce.